Good to meet you, Paul.
Yeah, wonderful to meet you too.
Yeah. So you started following me on Twitter about I guess 2-3 weeks back, and then I was like, who's this photographer guy? And I kind of flipped through and like, holy hell, you have an incredible amount of like fantastic uh pictures of live shows, events, just rock stars in general. How long have you been doing this for?
Well, I got started when I was about 18 years old and did the photography probably till I was about 20 or so. But before that, I was interviewing musicians, and because
Oh,
I was going to shows and all that, I thought, well, I'd like to figure out doing photography because I used to get all the rock magazines when I was a teenager, Hit Parade or Circus Magazine.
Rolling
And
Stone, and yeah.
yeah, and I always enjoyed the spirit of the photography in there, and I thought, well, I'd like to give that a crack. And my dad gave me my uncle's old film camera, a old Pentax, probably from the 1950s, and started using that, but that wasn't really going to be enough to capture what I needed to capture. But that kind of got me going for a few shows, and then got a more modern camera, well, modern for the time, for 1990. And then just figured it out for myself, really.
Yeah, because I mean, it's the difference of like interviewing somebody. You can get better at that if you just kind of hack away at it. But there is an art to photography. So, how long did it take for you to feel like, my stuff is as good as the next? Like I'm a pro photographer now.
Well, I mean, it was kind of, I suppose, the first show I photographed was the Black Crows, and seeing the Black Crows back then in 1990 was like probably seeing a early version of the Rolling Stones or the
Sure,
Small
100%.
Faces.
Yeah,
And that was the first concert that I had a photo pass for. Unfortunately, I didn't know that you had pit access, so my shots were all from the balcony. They weren't that great, but they're special to me. I mean, if you know what I mean, because they're your first. And so I kind of figured it out. And the first show that I shot, that I realized, oh, okay, maybe I am pretty good. It was kind of funny, I suppose. There was a band called Dread Zeppelin.
oh yeah, I
The
remember that was like a reggae zep.
Yes, and I photographed them, and I had a pretty good shot of the lead singer, and I thought, oh, maybe I'm not too bad. And the magazine I was shooting for, the editor, like, looked at that picture and said, oh yeah, that's really good. And I thought, oh, okay. So then, it was just, you're shooting film back then. I mean, we're in this digital world these days. I mean, people are going back to film, but when you're shooting shows, you don't know if you got what you think you got, and because of the lighting and all that. And so it took a little bit of trial and error, but I mean, right off the bat, I was, photographing acts like REO Speedwagon, Megadeth, Slayer, Ted Nugent, in I was getting some nice shots. But I mean, what I think a lot of times you're doing, no matter what you're doing, you're emulating. You see in a rock magazine, well, these shots, I like these types of shots, so you yourself go out there and try to emulate those. The same thing. I interviewed musicians. First musician I ever interviewed was Gene Simmons. I was a couple of days out of high school, 18 years old. So you
That's
you
awesome.
yeah, if you're going to dive in at the deep end of the pool, I
Sure,
guess.
sink or swim. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was an incredibly intimidating experience. I mean, as you can imagine. I mean, Gene Simmons, I mean, I don't know if you've had a chance to meet him, interview him, or anything like that.
I interviewed him when I was I did the afternoon show at a rock station here in Vancouver for 12 years. So I
Sure.
was lucky enough to talk to him then. But yeah, he's an intimidating guy, and he's also one of those guys, if there's blood in the water, he'll fucking bite you.
Sure, and I mean, at some level, it's a form of play with him, I suppose,
Sure
for
it is.
lack of
100%, yeah.
better words, but, it was intimidating, I've still
Super
got
easy.
that interview tape. I mean, one of these days, I'll have to digitize all my interviews. I started doing that about a year ago, but then,
Okay.
some other stuff came up, and didn't get around to, doing that. But I mean, I've got probably about 100 to 150 interviews that I did
Really?
over about, I don't know, maybe about a 4-year period.
Wow.
But
Okay. So have you shot Kiss? Have you been in the band
oh,
and been able to?
yeah,
Yeah.
I photographed Kiss, on the first time was on the Revenge tour, probably my favorite of the
Okay.
non-makeup, uh,
That was like the early 90s?
1992.
92, yeah.
And then I photographed them probably 2016. Obviously back in makeup, but wasn't the original lineup, of course.
Right.
But yeah, photographed Kiss a couple times. You betcha.
Well, that's great. And so what are some of the key highlights for you for rock gigs or just cool shows that you've shot at, or maybe even some things beyond the pictures and like backstage antics or anything that was special at shows that you wouldn't expect, I guess.
Well, I don't know if I really got into too much backstage antics. When I was younger, I didn't drink, didn't do drugs, none of that stuff.
Okay.
Probably qualified for some form of sainthood. I don't know. I should have checked into that. I had two uncles who were priests, so I
Right.
mean, but I was very focused on just taking pictures, and you know, as far as standouts, I mean, I think one of the things I always say is I approach things as a fan, and maybe that sounds corny, but I think you have to have that sort of a connection with who you're photographing at a certain level. Now, the other thing is when I got into doing photography, hair metal was the thing, and I grew up in the '80s. I mean, I came up on Van Halen, Motley Crue, stuff like that.
Sure.
So
Priest and Rat and all that stuff.
Rat, yeah, you
Yeah.
name it, Def Leppard.
Sure.
So that was what I was feeding on as a teenager, and I also had the hair to prove it back then.
Nice. Sort of.
And but hair today, gone tomorrow. But when I got into that, hair metal still ruled, and within about a year, it was just such a seismic shift because you get to November of '91, and Teen Spirit hits, and within almost a day, you went from the Motley Crues to Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and all of that, and
Alice in Chains and
Alice
Soundgarden.
in Chains. I mean, Alice in Chains, I were a band that I really, really enjoyed, and I was fortunate to photograph them when they were with the Clash of the Titans tour in 1991,
That's awesome.
and then again a couple months later they were opening for Van Halen, and they were just amazing. The energy that you felt from them, it was a real electricity, and you know, I I shot all that stuff in the '90s, and then I got out of shooting pictures because it was costly.
Hmm.
In being a college kid and all that. I mean, I get some stuff published nationally, globally, whatever, but it was pretty pricey because you had to pay for developing slide film, which is if you wanted to be in magazines, that's what you were going to be shooting on. So
Mm,
all that stuff went away into my garage for probably almost 20 years. And I started scanning that here and there after I got back into photography in 2010. And then in 2020, well, there's no place to go, nothing to do. So I scanned pretty much the bulk of my photography. And it was, you're kind of asking about when did you know you were good? The thing that I realized, and this was almost 30 years down the road, I was better than I knew I was, but I didn't have anything to compare it to in certain terms, I suppose, because I was still looking through things with the eyes of a, young man who's 18 years old. But then you come across shots, I've got a shot of Billy Corgan, um, you know, Smashing Pumpkins, when they were doing their first big tour. And, I look at that and, that was kind of a shot that I felt was, kind of in the vein of a Jim Marshall, who was one of the grandfathers of rock photography. So I kind of reconnected with a lot of my work later in life. And then the other thing is, you realize the community out there online, whether it's, we connected on Twitter or X or whatever it is today, or Instagram or Facebook, um, all that stuff has really come of age. So we want to kind of, at some level, recapture our youth. And we do that through music often, a lot of times. And you realize the bond and connection that a lot of these folks have with, say, Lane Staley or a Maynard James Keenan or a Billy Corgan, and what those musicians in those bands mean to people. And I realized how fortunate I was to be able to photograph them at such an early time in their careers. And you don't necessarily know where those people are going to go, and you have no concept of the internet or digitization at that time, because I mean that stuff really didn't exist in
mm.
1990, 91, or 92. I mean it did, but it wasn't the
Oh,
average person didn't
so
know
that's
that.
full at that point, dude. That's full on. You're a geek. You're
Yeah.
like a tech savvy.
Oh
It's
yeah.
way beyond what we're seeing today. Of course, right? Yeah,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. But back then you didn't have as many people who were photographing these shows. Many times I was the only person who was there in the
Mm,
pit. And now, I mean, everybody has their camera making
sure.
videos or photographs. So
Well, the
it's
thing is though, like these phones now,
yeah.
the cameras on these phones are incredible.
Oh yeah. I mean, you're going to get a picture that's almost every bit as good, and it's going to get infinitely better as the next generation of your phone comes out. So yeah, it's amazing. What's interesting, kind of, obviously the whole AI thing is going on.
Mm,
So Adobe just kind of went full on with a lot of the AI stuff, and the pictures that you can create with Adobe and AI look more lifelike than some of the camera pictures that you take, because those camera pictures now, some of them, don't look real. It's kind of interesting seeing that in comparing and contrasting that. I mean, if I see a photograph, I want a photograph to pretty much look like a photograph.
sure. Yeah, I saw something the other day that I just laughed at it. It was a girl that had, I guess, given her face to the AI,
Yeah.
and it was like the whole point of the account was, here's me, but it's AI driven.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's her in a bikini, it's her in a car, it's her golfing, it's all this shit, but
Right.
none of it's real. And
Right.
of course, it had like 220,000 followers or some shit like that, right?
Yeah, I know, it's madness.
Dude, it's maddening. That's like that infuriates me, man.
Well, the funny thing is, it just is that, and even before the AI thing, there'd be people who would accuse me of photoshopping a certain guitar into somebody's hands,
No, really?
and I'm not like a real Photoshop wizard or anything by any means, and I didn't Photoshop that guitar into somebody's hands. It would be like, well, they weren't playing that guitar until then. I was like, yeah, they were because I was
You're
there,
like, I
you
guess I
know.
got the first shot of him playing it, looks like.
Yeah, so I mean, but for a minute, like you almost question yourself because as time goes on, your memory does get a little bit rusty. But there's many shows that stand out in a incredible way for me. I mean, like Pantera, for example, you're up on stage, with Dimebag and Phil. I mean, that is just such an intense show. I mean, obviously, if you've been to a Pantera show, you know how intense it is. But being
Especially
on
back probably when you were shooting them in the early 90s, like that was they were a powerhouse, man.
91, small club, and you
Awesome.
know, again, you don't know where these artists are necessarily going to go. And I think a lot of times with photography, it's almost like fine wine. And that's not necessarily say stuff that I shot, but stuff that you shot. Your personal photographs as you go down the road, the years, those photographs become more powerful for you. And it's the same, with music and, seeing somebody like Eddie Vedder back in 1991, you remember instantly where you were, who you were,
How old you
and
were, all that stuff.
oh, absolutely. I mean, it's an amazing trip down memory lane to be able to have that. So I mean, I'm really grateful for the opportunities that I had back then because I didn't necessarily, like I said, I didn't realize who some of these artists would become, and I wasn't necessarily fans of a lot of those musicians. And it's nothing against them. In what I've also done is I scanned stuff in, is I would take time and visit that artist's music and kind of became more into them years down the road. For example, Tool. I never was really into Tool, but now I become immersed in their music and what Maynard's mindset was and all of that. And seeing them in '93, I mean, it was you see a Tool show now versus then. I mean, then it was just this raw, stripped down thing, and Maynard is just all over the stage and contorting himself and all of that.
Hmm.
And I have such a deep respect for a lot of those musicians, and they a lot of them were kind of that last moment before the internet. And there, I don't know if I want to use the word innocence, but maybe there was an innocence to things before everything was all over the place and you had file sharing and all of that stuff. And so that period, you know, something special about that. And I mean, Gen X, we had some really cool stuff in that period of time for our generation. And looking back, I think you become more appreciative of that as time goes on, and you see how things are manufactured these days. And there was just such an amazing connection that you had with those musicians and bands.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think you nailed it right on the head. Like we had, as Gen X, we had before the internet, and yet somehow it was the best of times.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
and of course now present day, like I can't even remember what it was like to not have internet and staring at my phone and going through memes and shooting my kids some funny shit from time to time. And
Sure.
but we had it good both ways. you know?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't discount the experience of this generation. It's just not our
Yeah, it's
generation.
just not the
And
same, right? But
no, it's not. But they're going to have children, and they're going to say, well, their children aren't having the same experience or whatever. Before
right.
we had this, that, so. Yeah, I mean, I think, you look at the Woodstock generation and they'll say, well, those who came up in the late 80s and 90s, they didn't have this or that. This was better. I don't know if I would say, one is really better than the other. I mean, it's your experience. I think that even though I photographed, I also experienced these things and took them into myself at I guess, for lack of better words, at a cellular level. And if I somehow, unfortunately, lost all the pictures that I took, I still had that experience, and it still means something to me.
Yeah.
And you connect with that, which I think is very important.
Yeah. Oh, as a photographer, you're gonna love this quick story. I'll tell you that
Yeah.
jogged the memory. So I went down to San Francisco, and I did the world album premiere with Metallica for their Saint Anger album.
Oh, wow.
So I went down and I saw them at a small club called oh, what was it called again? Really small place, like maybe I don't know, 500, 800 people kind of thing. San
Hmm.
Francisco. And took a bunch of pictures, and I took a couple winners from the radio station with me in the airplane and this and that, blah blah, like tons of great photos. And then on the flight back, brand new camera, but on the flight back it had said something, to the effect of like, do you want to format the card? I'm
Oh,
thinking, yeah, I think I do want to format the card, I guess. Like, I don't know what that means, but I'll say
right.
sure. And of course, as soon as I hit format, it's like
Oh
I'm
my
just
gosh.
watching as this new camera with all these pictures of Lars and James and like, you know,
Oh,
but the point is that it's still here.
oh, sure.
All
Yeah.
that shit's still there. I may not have
Right.
the pictures anymore, but yet somehow it lives on.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I get it. It'd be nice to have the pictures. And I
And it
mean,
has to
I've
have
had
those pictures, yeah.
a couple of times. Usually you're able to shoot three songs. And I remember shooting Joe Satriani. I think this was in like 1992.
Okay.
And it was in the winter, and I took my camera in, and because of the temperature difference, I got my camera up, started to take pictures, and it's like everything just steamed up, and I was like, oh my god.
Oh,
It's like,
oh no.
and then I in 2020 or 2021, when I was going through negatives, I like rediscovered those negatives, and it was like, well, maybe there's something I can do with a couple of those. I was like, no. It's just bringing back
It just
a
a wall of steam across the whole thing, right?
well,
Like,
you could see his silhouette, but it wasn't in an artistic enough manner. I mean, I've got a few photos that I've put out there that I thought, well, this really isn't passable, but people like them now. I've got a blurry shot of Dimebag,
oh,
and it's just the motion and emotion of that. Or I've got a shot of Phil Anselmo flipping me off. It's a little bit blurry, but people like the photo. So sometimes you're a little too hard on yourself with something. Put it out there, and raise the flag, see if anybody salutes, I suppose.
that's great. And what was the first concert that you went to? Not necessarily where you shot, but like what was your
Oh,
first concert you went to?
Stevie Ray Vaughan in 1985.
Mm,
Um, but with that said, I think my first concert was maybe a year before. I feel that everybody has a first concert that they say that was their first concert, and it's really cool. And then there's this concert that they saw that was not really cool.
yeah,
But
yeah.
the first one was probably in my auditorium in my junior high. It was like some cover band playing Van Halen Jump and all this stuff, but I thought it was like cool as hell. But that was probably my first, but Stevie Ray Vaughan was my, professional first, I guess, as
Yeah, I
far
mean, you
as.
can't really call a cover band a concert, like, even if that was legitimately your first concert, like, that can't
Yeah,
it's not
but I geeked out a little, because
yeah.
you're in that
Oh, sure, if
you know,
you're into it.
13, 14 years old, that's where, you're starting to blossom musically. No matter what your generation is, you're trying to kind of connect, see what you connect with. I mean, I was fortunate. Um, I'm the youngest. My brother and sister are 10, 11 years older than me. So I grew up with them both listening to music, but both different genres. My brother was Deep Purple, Black Sabbath. My sister was Joni Mitchell and Billy Joel. So
Oh, okay.
I've always been, eclectic in my tastes. I mean, good music is good music. I mean,
Yeah, I
I
feel the same.
never really buy into people who says like, well, that's crap, that's crap. It's like there's
There
something good about all the stuff.
and there's crap in every genre.
Oh, sure, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
Paul, do you work a day job, or does photography, pay the bills and keep you alive? And
Well, I've done a number of different things. I've done a software company, do some stuff with AI,
hmm,
but I also do photography as part of my professionalism, I guess, so to speak. I do, in addition to the music stuff, I do tourism photography for the area that I'm in. I'm in West Michigan. I'm in Grand Haven, Michigan, but Grand Rapids is where I was born and raised. So I do photography for the Convention and Visitors Bureau. So I also enjoy, photographing a lot of the sites around, the area. West Michigan here, we're right on Lake Michigan.
hmm,
We've got great stuff in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So I have a lot of different, interests as far as, photography goes.
hmm. So, what is an average day for you then?
Well, average day is, I mean, I do have been building up my socials for print sales, and that has begun doing pretty well for me. Most people obviously are interested in stuff that was shot in the 90s.
Yeah,
So take care of orders that come in. If there's stuff that I'm doing with software, kind of focus on that. Then building stuff with the AI newsletter, take care of stuff with that. If I'm doing photography out in the field, it's just kind of a matter of I just covered about 80 city and county parks. So just going out there into nature and seeing what captures your eye and what you feel that people are going to connect with who want to get out and explore parks or something from a tourist or in tourism perspective.
hmm. Cool, man. It sounds like you had a pretty creative life. What would you say is your career highlight? Like, could you pick one thing?
I mean, I think photography is obviously something that I've come back to. So, I mean, I think, with something that I would be remembered for would be photography. I was fortunate enough a few years ago to have an exhibition at a museum here in Michigan. So I'm proud of that. Proud of my photography from a professional perspective. But I enjoy creating and communicating. I think that that's something that's been kind of a natural aspect for me, I suppose.
Mhm, mhm. And where do you find that you're most active on social media? I see you lots on Twitter, but are you the same on Instagram and Facebook and all that, or
Yeah, I would say, of them all, I mean, I like the aesthetic of Instagram, but Twitter is something that I've been on since probably about 2009, but it's only in the last year that I've been able to kind of really connect with people more on Twitter, and I think that with any of those, it's a matter of finding your audience and finding a common voice, no matter what you're doing, and being able to kind of share and connect with people. I mean, also connect with people through an email list. From a marketing perspective, I think, email is infinitely important, because if any of these platforms go away, you're kind of in a bind. So if you've got an email list, you've got something that you're able to say, well, hey, here's where we're going, here's what we're doing. So I mean, it's just, you've seen that time and time and again. Somebody loses their page or their platform, and it's not necessarily that they did something controversial. I mean, it's just kind of where we live these days. And I mean, we're not playing on a playground that we own. It's rented space, even though we built it up.
Yeah, no, right? Suddenly like, oh, where's my account? What happened?
Yeah,
What happened to
and
my page? Where
I've seen that happen to
both
some
are many
pretty
friends of, yeah.
big photographers, and
Wow.
wasn't anything that they necessarily did. It just in the realm of shit happens.
Yeah. Wow. All right, Paul, I'm going to let you go, bud. I want to respect your time here. I told you it'd be 15 minutes. We're into probably more than half hour here. So where is the best place for people to see your work? Like, do you got a specific website that people can go to?
Yeah, I mean, my main site is Paul Jendrasiak photo.com, or any of the socials. If you just type in my name, PaulJendrasiak, you'll be able to come up with my Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. And I love connecting with folks who kind of share the same connection with music. I've met a lot of
That's,
wonderful folks just like you, and you find those amazing connections, and music is such a great thing at the end of the day.
yeah, that's great. Paul, thank you for doing this. Nice to meet you. Nice to jump on a Zoom here with you. And I guess we'll see you online.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful to meet you.